Did you know that nearly half of retirees underestimate their life expectancy by 5 years or more? How could living an extra 5 years impact your retirement plan? That's what we'll be discussing in today's video. My name is Spencer Ford, CEO and Wealth Advisor with Conservative Financial Solutions. I'm also a certified financial planner professional, and let's get into it. As I mentioned, nearly half of retirees underestimate their life expectancy by 5 years or more. Underestimating your life expectancy could have a serious impact on your retirement plan. A longer life, while a blessing, also means needing more income, incurring more expenses, and more time for inflation to erode your purchasing power. So let's look at an example of how underestimating your life expectancy could affect your financial plan. And in order to illustrate this, I created a hypothetical couple named Mike and Susan. Mike and Susan are both 65 years old and retiring at the beginning of next year. Mike believes his life expectancy to be to age 85 years of age, and Susan believes her life expectancy to be to age 90. When he retires at the age of 65, Mike is expecting to receive $26,000 a year from Social Security, and Susan's expecting to receive $23,000 a year from Social Security. Mike has saved $700,000 in his 401k, and Susan has saved $450,000 in her 403b. If you're not familiar with the 403b, it's very similar to a 401k. It's just often used by nonprofit organizations like hospitals and schools. Total, Mike and Susan have saved $1,150,000 for retirement, and they need $95,000 a year, or just under $8,000 a month, to maintain their standard of living in retirement. After what Social Security provides them, they need $46,000 a year from their investments. So let me walk you through an example that I built using Excel to bring this point to light. Now, just so you know, in this case, I am using an inflation rate of 2.5%. And over the past 20 years, inflation has averaged 2.57%. So we might be a little bit low on our inflation projection, but we've seen some pretty high inflation in recent years. So hopefully we'll see that average come down a bit, which is why I chose to use 2.5% inflation in this example. So as you can see from this first plan that we have Mike and Susan right here, and then what I did was I just took the returns from the previous 25 years. So we're going back to the year 2000. Now, do I expect the next 25 years to look exactly like the last 25 years? No, but I'm just trying to give you an example of real returns that have taken place. So I'm using the S&P 500 in the U.S. Aggregate Bond Index, and I'm using a 60-40 portfolio. So 60% in the S&P 500, 40% in the U.S. Aggregate Bond Index. If you're someone who's using that 60-40, that traditional 60-40 portfolio, this is just an example of that. So here's how they would have done over that time frame. As I mentioned, they need $46,000 a year. They have $1,150,000 saved for retirement, and we're going to increase this by 2.5% each year to help them keep up with inflation. As we scroll down here, you can see I highlighted age 85 because that's when Mike is expected to pass away. And their income need from their investments jumps from $73,000 to $83,000. The reason why I did that is because I'm projecting that Susan's going to need to take a little bit more from their investments after Mike passes away to make up for what Social Security is, to make up for the loss of Social Security income. Because when Mike passes away, there's going to be a loss of Social Security income. So I showed Susan needing $10,000 more from her investments. But we even get all the way to the end of Susan's life expectancy, and you can see there's $1.3 million left in their retirement accounts. And that's great news for both Mike and Susan, because part of their goal was to make sure that they were not only being able to take the money that they could take that they needed over time, but also grow their investments over the course of their lifetime. But now let's look at our second example. And our second example is showing them living for an extra 5 years. So if we go through this example, you can see here what I'm showing is I'm actually going to show Mike still passing away at the age of 85, but Susan actually living for another 5 years beyond the age of 90. And what I did to illustrate this was I just started repeating the returns of the first 5 years that we used. Again, is that going to be an accurate representation of what's going to happen in the future? Probably not, but I also like using this because those are 3 pretty bad years in the market, so it's nice to kind of see what that situation looks like. So for Susan, as we look at this, she still needs that extra $10,000 in order to make up for the loss of Social Security income, but now she needs that for another 5-year period of time. So instead of having $1.3 million left over, there's $912,000 left over in just 5 years. And just Susan living an extra 5 years, they've lost $400,000 in their retirement accounts based on what they would have had in our previous example. I ran one more illustration, and the illustration that I ran here was, now what happens if Mike passes away at the age of 75? We're expecting him to live until age 85, but what happens if he passes away at the age of 75? What happens to Susan then? And then on top of that, what happens if Susan lives that extra 5 years still? So again, you see this jump of the extra $10,000 she's going to need after there's a reduction in Social Security income, and we run that all the way down, and now there's $611,000 when Susan reaches the age of 95 in this example. So that's less than half of what it was in our first example when they had $1.3 million left over. Now, I say all of this not to scare you. I just want you to be able to think about this and conceptualize and see the importance of planning for different life expectancies in different scenarios. We all want to hope for the best, but we need to plan for the worst. Now, this is a pretty limited illustration, and you might ask the question, well, are there some things that we could have done differently to maybe help Mike or Susan out if they end up living beyond their projected life expectancies? And there are absolutely a few things that we could do. We could look at Social Security. Do we take Social Security at a different time? Do we maybe delay Social Security for a couple of years in retirement so they end up getting more from Social Security over their lifetimes? That would be something to look at for sure. We illustrated them needing more income every single year, when the reality is that most people spend the most money in their retirement during their 60s. It decreases a little bit in their 70s, even a little bit more in their 80s. It does tick up at the end of life expectancy traditionally because of healthcare expenses, but typically you're still spending the most amount of money in your retirement in your 60s and early 70s. So we could project that, and that would make the situation look different for Mike and Susan. The other thing that we could do is we could look at some different tax saving strategies, such as Roth conversions, if that's what makes sense for them, to help them save those taxes on the back end when Susan becomes a single filer because she's now a surviving spouse. Right now, they're both married. They're married filing joint, taking advantage of the expanded tax brackets, but when one person becomes a surviving spouse, now they're subject to the much more constrained single filer brackets. We could look at that and plan around that and how we can mitigate that future tax liability. So there are certainly some things that we can do in order to make the situation look better, but you don't know that you need to look at those things unless you're running these projections to see what that increased life expectancy may do. So make sure you're planning for a long life. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe. My name is Spencer Ford, and we'll see you in the next one.